So here's a question for you. Have you ever thought about what it is God intends for creation? Like, what's the point of all this? We're going to think about that today on Now What Devotions from Trinity Lutheran and Cyrus. I'm over in Morris today for a series of meetings and was taking a stroll over by the lake here in town, listening to the geese and watching the fall come on down into town. And we're thinking today, we're in the book of Mark, chapter 10, and Jesus is talking about God's intent for creation and how man's attitudes kind of runs afoul of that, runs into it, and how that can become a problem for community. So some scribes, some leaders come to Jesus and they want to test him. And they say, Jesus, what about divorce? So they do what a lot of politicians and what a lot of troublemakers do these days, which is they go right to the heart of a really sensitive topic. They go right to the heart of something that everyone will have opinions about, and there are no good answers. And they drop that one on Jesus, and he says, guys, these rules are for you. Moses made these rules for you. But what God intends for creation is something different. It's something where we wouldn't need these rules. And that's a hard answer because it pushes us into the place of thinking about, well, what does God intend for creation? And I'm going to suggest to you a possibility here, one that I've been learning from a fellow named Miroslav Volf. And Mr. Volf is a brilliant theologian. He spoke actually at this conference I was at recently. And one of the metaphors he develops to think about God's intent for creation is a message that God makes clear in Genesis, in Exodus. He makes it clear in John and in Revelation that God wants to move into the neighborhood. God has already moved into the neighborhood and would like to live with us and live so in a kingdom and in a family and make a home for God's self and for all humanity. This whole idea of what makes a good home is a really powerful way of thinking about how we relate to God and also how we relate to one another. Because home isn't just a place, right? Like, it is a place, but it's also a series of relationships. And it's not just relationships, it's also like a social structure. It's a place where you could be cared for, but you care for others. And at the same time, home is for you, but not just for you. And there is a leader in the home, but we all have some leadership as well. Like, it's a powerful metaphor in that when God says, I intend to live amongst you, and my law will be written on your hearts, that gives us some really powerful ways to think about what God is up to in the world. When Jesus talks about divorce with his disciples, he says, when somebody goes out looking for somebody else out of desire and selfishness, they're just committing adultery. And he's right. Note, Jesus does not directly address what's going on in relationships where there's no home to be found, where there's oppression or there's hurt or there's abuse or there's pain. He doesn't speak to that. But if we think about this idea of God building a home amongst us and what God's intent is for us, we know that God intends for us love and joy and resilience and being able to persevere, but also not staying in situations that hurt us. God intends for us freedom, not oppression, and God frees the oppressed and unbinds the bound. From that point of view, then, when we think about what God intends for creation, it makes sense that we get to be partners in that, because we are part of making this life a home for others and for ourselves, and a home that we can have with God, because God is moving into the neighborhood. Therefore, we are to be people worthy of that home, who can continue to live in that home, and also whose lives aren't a contradiction or cause others harm in that home. Powerful thoughts. I would encourage you to take a look at the book. It's by Miroslav Volf. I'll put the title below. You can always check that out if you like. But otherwise, that's your thought for the week. What is it that God intends in creation? Because clearly there's something about beauty and life and resilience and freedom, but also something about God moving in. which Jesus reiterates here today in Mark chapter 10. This is Pastor Chris signing off for now. Now at Devotions, Trinity Lutheran and Cyrus over by the lake in Morris. Bye-bye.